In the Jeffrey Epstein case that has actually unfolded, I think it's safe to say that justice is finally being served, but not for long, I'm afraid, because with the connections that this man has and the amount of money that he possesses, I think it's safe to say that he'll serve minimal jail time because of the fact that he has a lot of money and he has a lot of connections. Bill Cosby only got sentenced 3 years in prison, and not just because of the fact that he has fame and money, but he was also legally blind, so that's another thing that they looked into. But if it was somebody like Ariel Castro, who has kidnapped 3 women, kept them in his house for 11 years with no showers, by the way, fed them once a week, barely fed them for only once a day, every 7 days a week, and and the fact that they never saw the daylight for 11 years in a row, I think it's safe to say that since he wasn't rich or powerful or it wasn't even famous, this is why the judge sentenced him to 1,000 years in prison, and he died a month later after he was sentenced. But for someone like Jeffrey Epstein, I don't think he's going to serve a lot of time, and I'm pretty sure the verdict has already determined that. But there's some rumors that he was somehow a part of intelligence. I mean, this guy was connected with Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. That's the ironic part right there. So I guess it's safe to say maybe those stories about Bill Clinton raping those women at Oxford are probably true, and I actually believe it because the guy's a freaking pervert anyway. But when we're talking about, Jeffrey Epstein, yeah, the guy's not a good person. Sex trafficking minors who were 14 years old, and they had to recruit other girls because he paid them that much money, and that's what they did to survive, which is a very, very sad reality for these young girls who were still children, 14 years old. But here's what I think should actually happen. Either Jeffrey Epstein faces the death penalty, ends up being sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, or he needs to be tortured 24/7, 365 days a week, which is what everybody wants to happen to a child molester, a rapist, and even those punks like Jeffrey Epstein, who has been involved in sex trafficking of underage girls. And that's very disgusting to me. I mean, you're a billionaire. Why would you need to do all that? You can make good use of your money, and he has all the everything in the world, including a $7.7 million mansion. So why he's screwing around with these young girls is beyond me, or should I say in this case, raping them, being the disgusting pervert that he is. But here's the thing that I really don't understand. Like in this system that we're living in, if you're famous and you have a lot of money, you can get away with this stuff scot-free. You'll get a very minimal sentence because you have money and you can afford the best lawyers. So with that being said, I mean, he already has a charging. I mean, he was already charged in 2002. He already had a charge uh, pending against him in 2002. So this guy already has a record, need I remind you. I mean, the whole thing is very, very sickening. So those three options need to be considered. In my opinion, and from the way I see it, rape is worse than murder. Because when you rape a victim, the victim's life is never going to be the same. They're not going to be the same person again. They have to live with that pain for the rest of their existence. They're never going to be the same person. Some of them overcome through it, and they're going to be fine. They're going to turn out to be A-okay. But the majority of them are not going to be okay. They're damaged. They're traumatized. They have emotional and mental and psychological pain, and that will reoccur in their mind and even in their dreams every night, every day. But at least when a person has been murdered, in death you can rest in peace. So the same thing needs to be applied for people like Jeffrey Epstein. Execution, I'll support that. We're talking about, but if we're talking about life in prison without the possibility of parole, I support that the most. Or better yet, just take him to some abandoned warehouse or basement, torture him with the worst kind of weapons, 24/7, 365 days a year. And all he needs to do is all he needs is to be fed scraps of food, get some hammers, a nail and hammer, get some saws to kind of like, maim him. Get all the worst objects you can to torture a guy like that. Nothing's worse than a person who sexually abuses others. Nothing's worse than a rapist, and nothing's worse than a child molester. And I've always wondered why a murderer spends life in prison without the possibility of parole or faces the death sentence, but a racist or a sex offender, a rapist or a sex offender doesn't suffer the same fate. Rape is much worse than murder. You torture, you scar a person's life forever. But when a person's murdered, the family is going to be in pain, but at least that victim can rest in peace. But rape, it damages the victim and the family. So that's worse. At least the victim can rest in peace when they're murdered, but the victim is suffering continuously and the family will suffer continuously. So that's extra damage right there. So Jeffrey Epstein needs to suffer some kind of fate. He needs to spend life in prison without the possibility of parole, where he can be tormented by other inmates 24/7, 365 days a year. Those kind of people are not human. Jeffrey Epstein is not a human being. I was obviously disappointed about the Cosby case because of how much of a role model he was towards the black community, but he doesn't deserve any mercy either. I have no respect for those kind of people. Those people called rapists, they're not even people. I refer to them as things because they have no value in this society or even in this planet. They don't deserve any fairness from society. They haven't been fair to those who are weak and defenseless, such as minors. Why do they deserve a voice to speak? I find that very sickening, to be honest. So Jeffrey Epstein, he needs to suffer. He will pay for his crimes. And it's not, and I've met somebody who stood by the sword of injustice. They will perish and suffer. They will suffer and perish in fear behind bars. And so will people like him. And I'll wish for that more than anything. That's what needs to happen to him.